I stopped believing in myself the day my husband told me I was nothing without him. Now, 30 years later, my face is on every billboard in the city, and he's the one calling me for help. My name is Marianne Fletcher, and for most of my marriage I was invisible. I met Daniel when I was 22 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in graphic design and stars in my eyes. He was 27, already climbing the corporate ladder at his father's investment firm, wearing expensive suits and driving a car that cost more than my parents' house. When he walked into the coffee shop where I was sketching logos for my tiny freelance business, something shifted in the air. He sat down across from me without asking, looked at my drawings and said, "You have talent, but talent without direction is just a hobby." I should have heard the condescension in those words. I should have seen the way he positioned himself as the authority, the teacher, the one who knew better. But I was young and he was handsome, and when he asked me to dinner, I said yes without hesitation. We married 18 months later in a wedding his mother planned. I wore the dress she chose, walked down the aisle of the church she attended, and smiled for photos with relatives I'd never met. My own mother whispered to me before the ceremony, "Marianne, are you sure about this?" But I nodded, squeezed her hand, and told her I loved him. And I did. Or at least I loved who I thought he was. The first few years were a careful choreography of small surrenders. Daniel suggested I stop taking freelance work because it was unpredictable and unstable. He said his income was more than enough for both of us, that I should focus on making our house a home. I agreed, telling myself it was practical, that newlyweds needed time to build their foundation. I painted the walls of our suburban house in soft neutrals he approved of, planted flowers in the garden, and learned to cook the meals his mother had made for him growing up. By our 5th anniversary, I had stopped sketching altogether. My design software sat unused on an old laptop in the closet. When friends from college called to invite me to gallery openings or design conferences, I made excuses. Daniel always had something planned, a dinner with clients, a weekend at his parents' lake house. And honestly, after years of hearing him dismiss my creative aspirations as cute or quaint, I had begun to believe that maybe he was right. Maybe I was just a girl with a hobby, not an artist, not a professional. I remember one particular evening, maybe 7 years into our marriage, when an old classmate named Rebecca called. She just opened her own design studio and wanted to know if I'd be interested in collaborating on a project. My heart had leaped at the possibility, that old excitement I'd buried so deep suddenly surfacing. But when I mentioned it to Daniel over dinner, he'd set down his fork and looked at me with that patient expression he used when explaining why something I wanted wasn't practical. "Rebecca always was a dreamer," he said, cutting his steak with precise movements. "But dreams don't pay mortgages, Marianne. She'll probably be bankrupt within a year. You don't want to attach your name to that kind of instability." I'd nodded, called Rebecca back the next day, and made an excuse about being too busy. I heard the disappointment in her voice and something else too. Pity maybe. Or understanding. She knew what I'd become. The real breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October, 12 years into our marriage. I had been feeling restless for months, a gnawing sensation in my chest that woke me up at 3 in the morning. I was 44 years old, and when I looked in the mirror I barely recognized myself. The vibrant young woman with paint-stained fingers and big dreams had been replaced by someone beige, someone who coordinated her sweater sets with the season, and had memorized her husband's coffee order down to the exact temperature. That morning I made breakfast while Daniel read the financial news on his tablet. I set his plate in front of him, scrambled eggs exactly how he liked them, toast cut diagonally, orange juice in the crystal glass his mother had given us. He didn't look up. "Daniel," I said, my voice tentative, "I've been thinking. Maybe I should go back to work. There's a design studio downtown that's hiring, and I could update my portfolio." He finally looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. It wasn't anger. It was pity. "Marianne," he said slowly, like he was explaining something to a child, "you've been out of the industry for over a decade. Technology has changed. Design trends have evolved. You'd be competing with kids fresh out of school who know all the latest software. And honestly, sweetheart, you were never that good to begin with. You had potential maybe, but you never pushed yourself. You were always too soft, too sentimental. The design world would eat you alive." Each word landed like a stone in my chest. I stood there holding the coffee pot, my hand trembling slightly, trying to process what he just said. I just thought. I started, but he cut me off. You thought what? That you'd suddenly become independent? That you'd be some career woman at your age? He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Marianne, you'd never make it on your own. You need structure, guidance. That's not a bad thing. Some people are leaders and some people are supporters. You're a supporter. You're good at it. Why isn't that enough? I set the coffee pot down carefully, afraid that if I didn't, I might throw it. I just want to feel like I matter, I whispered. You do matter, he said, returning his attention to his tablet. You matter here in this house, taking care of things. That's your role, Marianne. Accept it. He left for work 20 minutes later, kissing my cheek absently on his way out the door. I stood in our gleaming kitchen with its granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, everything perfect and cold, and something inside me cracked. I spent that entire day in a fog. I cleaned the house that didn't need cleaning, folded laundry that was already folded, rearranged the spice cabinet by alphabetical order. But around 2 in the afternoon, I found myself standing in front of the hallway mirror, really looking at myself for the first time in years. I was 44 years old. I was attractive enough, healthy enough, smart enough. So why did I feel so small? Why did I feel like I was disappearing? I thought about my mother, who'd been an elementary school teacher for 30 years. She'd raised 3 children, maintained her career, and never once acted like being a mother and being a professional were mutually exclusive. She'd always told me, Marianne, never make yourself less so someone else can feel more. But that's exactly what I'd done. By evening, I found myself standing in our spare bedroom, the one we'd always said would be for a baby that never came. I opened the closet and pulled out the old laptop I'd hidden away years ago. My hand shook as I powered it on, expecting it to be dead, but it hummed to life. I opened my old design files, work I'd done in my 20s, logos for small businesses, posters for community theater, a few web designs. Looking at them now, I could see they were rough, unsophisticated. But they had energy, passion. They had me in them. That night, Daniel worked late. He often did. I made myself dinner, something simple, and ate it while watching tutorial videos on YouTube. Design software had evolved, but the principles were the same. Composition, color theory, typography. It was like hearing a language I'd forgotten I spoke. If you've ever felt like you disappeared inside someone else's expectations, you know what I'm talking about. Hit that like button if you understand. Over the next 3 months, I lived a double life. During the day, while Daniel was at work, I took online courses. I rebuilt my skills from the ground up, learning new software, studying contemporary design trends, filling notebooks with sketches and ideas. At night, I was the dutiful wife, preparing meals, asking about his day, pretending everything was normal. I told myself I was just exploring, just seeing if I still had it. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Those words he'd said that October morning had lodged themselves in my heart like splinters, and every day they pushed deeper. You'd never make it on your own. I had to know if that was true. By Christmas, I had built a new portfolio. Nothing fancy, just a website with 10 pieces of work. A mix of rebranded logos for fictional companies and some editorial designs inspired by articles I'd read. I wasn't ready to show anyone yet, but having it exist, seeing my name on that website, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Daniel gave me diamond earrings for Christmas, expensive ones that came in a velvet box. I thanked him, put them on, and felt nothing. His mother came for dinner and complimented my roast, said I'd finally learned to cook properly. I smiled and refilled her wine glass and thought about color palettes. The holidays were particularly difficult that year. Daniel's entire family descended on our house for 3 days. His 2 sisters, both successful in their own right, one a lawyer, one a doctor, talked about their careers while I served food and cleared plates. At one point, Daniel's younger sister, Catherine, cornered me in the kitchen. You seem different this year, Marianne, she said, watching me rinse dishes. Quieter somehow. Are you okay? I almost told her. Almost said, your brother has convinced me I'm worthless, and I'm secretly trying to prove him wrong. But instead I smiled and said, just tired. The holidays are exhausting. She nodded, but I could see she didn't quite believe me. You know, she said carefully, you don't have to be the perfect hostess. You don't have to make everything perfect for everyone else. I looked at her then. really looked at her and saw something unexpected. Understanding. Sympathy. Maybe even recognition of what her brother had done to me. "Thank you," I whispered. She squeezed my hand and went back to the dining room, leaving me alone with the dishes and my thoughts. The new year arrived cold and brittle. January in Chicago is unforgiving, the kind of weather that makes you question why humans ever decided to build cities in places where the air hurts your face. But I barely noticed. I was consumed by a project, something I decided to create just for myself. I designed a complete brand identity for a fictional coffee company called Second Brew. The concept was simple. Coffee for people starting over, people claiming second chances. I created a logo, packaging designs, a website mock-up, social media templates, everything a real company would need. I worked on it obsessively, sometimes staying up until 3 in the morning while Daniel slept upstairs, perfecting the curve of a letter or adjusting the shade of brown in the color scheme by single degrees. When I finished, I sat back and looked at what I'd created. It was good. Not just good for someone who'd been out of the game for 12 years. It was genuinely good. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I created a profile on a design networking site, uploaded my portfolio, and started reaching out to small businesses in the area. I didn't tell Daniel. I told myself I would eventually, but the time never seemed right. And maybe, if I'm being honest, I was afraid. Afraid he'd crush this fragile thing I was building before it had a chance to grow. The first response came from a woman named Patricia who owned a boutique bakery on the south side. She'd seen my Second Brew project and loved the aesthetic. She needed a rebrand, something fresh and modern but still warm and welcoming. Could I help? My heart pounded as I typed my response. Yes, I could help. We met at her bakery on a Tuesday morning. Patricia was in her 50s, warm and direct, with flour perpetually dusting her forearms. She showed me her current logo, something her nephew had made on a free design app, and explained her vision. She wanted to attract a younger crowd without losing her loyal older customers. She had a budget of $2,000. $2,000. For my work. For something I created. I told Daniel I was having lunch with an old friend. I met with Patricia instead, took notes, asked questions, felt that old creative energy surging through me like electricity. I went home and worked for 6 hours straight, barely stopping to eat. And by midnight I had 3 logo concepts ready to present. Patricia chose the second one. A simple but elegant design featuring a rolling pin transformed into wheat stalks. She cried when she saw it. Actually cried. "This is exactly what I imagined," she said. "You've captured my bakery's heart." That was the moment I understood what I'd been missing all these years. Not just work, not just independence, but purpose. The feeling of creating something meaningful, something that mattered to someone. I finished Patricia's complete rebrand over the next month. Logo, business cards, packaging, signage, social media graphics. She paid me in full and immediately posted photos of her new brand on Instagram. Within days, 3 other small business owners had contacted me through my website. I was working again. Really working. Daniel still didn't know. I hid the money in a separate bank account I'd opened online. I scheduled all my client meetings for times when he was at work. I told him I joined a book club, a yoga class, volunteered at the library. The lies came easily, which should have troubled me more than it did. But every time I thought about telling him the truth, I remembered his words. "You'd never make it on your own." And I decided I needed to prove him wrong first, needed to build something undeniable before I revealed it. By March I had 8 clients. Small businesses mostly, but also a nonprofit that needed fundraising materials and a local musician who wanted album art. My designs were getting noticed. People were leaving reviews on my website, referring their friends. I was making more money than I'd expected, not enough to live on, not yet, but enough to matter. One afternoon, I was meeting with a client at a coffee shop downtown when I ran into someone from my past. Olivia Chan, a classmate from college, someone I'd lost touch with years ago. She was a successful art director at a major advertising agency now. And when she saw me sitting there with my laptop and sketches spread across the table, her face lit up. "Marianne Fletcher?" she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Is that really you?" We spent an hour catching up. I told her about my marriage, carefully editing out the painful parts. She told me about her career, her recent divorce, her 2 teenage daughters. When I showed her some of my recent work, her eyes widened. Marianne, this is incredible. You're working again. Just started. It's small, but it's something. Small? Are you kidding? This bakery rebrand is phenomenal. Have you thought about going after bigger clients? I hesitated. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Listen to me. I wasted 5 years of my life in a marriage where my husband made me feel like I wasn't good enough. When I finally left and started focusing on my career again, I realized something. The only person who gets to decide if you're ready is you. Not your husband, not your clients, not anyone else. You. Her words hit me like cold water. How did you know? About my marriage. Because I recognized that look in your eyes. Like you're apologizing for existing. I had that look too once. But you're talented, Marianne. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. She gave me her card, told me to call her if I ever wanted to talk about opportunities in advertising. After she left, I sat there for a long time, staring at her card, thinking about what she'd said. That's when things started to get complicated. One evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. I was in the spare bedroom, headphones on, working on a restaurant menu design. I didn't hear him come up the stairs. Didn't hear him open the door. I only noticed him when his reflection appeared in my laptop screen, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. My heart stopped. I pulled off my headphones and turned around. "What are you doing?" he asked. His voice was calm, but there was something sharp underneath it. I looked at the screen, at the menu design with its careful typography and elegant layout. I'm designing. For who? A restaurant. A new Italian place downtown. He stepped into the room, and I watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing. The laptop, the sketches pinned to the walls, the color samples spread across the desk. Evidence of a life he knew nothing about. How long has this been going on? He asked. A few months. My voice was steadier than I expected. And you didn't think to tell me? I was going to. I just wanted to make sure it was real first. He laughed, that same dismissive sound from months ago. Real? Marianne, you're playing designer for small-time operations who probably can't even afford real professionals. This isn't a career. This is a hobby that's gotten out of hand. Something hot flared in my chest. I've made $12,000 in 3 months. That stopped him. He stared at me, his expression shifting from condescension to something else. Surprise? Concern? I couldn't tell. $12,000, he repeated. Yes, from my hobby. We stood there in silence, the air between us crackling with things unsaid. Finally, he shook his head. This is ridiculous. You're 44 years old, Marianne. You can't just decide to have a career now. What about this house? What about our life? What about supporting me? What about supporting me? I asked quietly. He looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. I do support you. I've supported you for 15 years. I've given you everything. Everything except belief. His jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic. You want to play at being a working woman? Fine. But don't expect me to take it seriously until you prove you're more than a middle-aged woman having a midlife crisis. He left the room. I heard him walk downstairs, heard the television turn on, heard the familiar sounds of our evening routine beginning without me. I sat in that spare bedroom surrounded by my work, my proof that I was more than what he'd said I was, and I realized something crucial. It didn't matter how much money I made or how many clients I had. He would never see me as anything other than what he decided I was 15 years ago. That night was the first time I seriously considered leaving. But leaving a 15-year marriage isn't simple, especially when you've spent those years becoming financially dependent on someone. I had $12,000 saved, but that wasn't enough to start over. I needed more time, more clients, more proof that I could actually do this. So I made a plan. Do you think my decision was right or wrong? Tell me in the comments. Over the next 6 months, I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I took on every client I could handle, sometimes working until dawn and sleeping for a few hours before Daniel woke up. I raised my rates gradually, learning what my work was worth. I joined professional design organizations, networked with other freelancers, took advanced courses in branding strategy. My portfolio grew. My client list expanded. I started getting inquiries from larger companies, organizations with actual marketing budgets. A local tech startup hired me to design their entire brand identity for $15,000. A regional hospital system needed a redesign of their patient materials. A real estate company wanted a complete visual overhaul. I was becoming known. Daniel noticed the change in me, I could tell. I was distracted during dinners, exhausted in the evenings, distant in ways I'd never been before. He'd ask what was wrong and I'd say I was tired, just tired. He seemed satisfied with that answer, happy to return to his own world of investment portfolios and client dinners. We were living parallel lives in the same house, barely intersecting. One night in July, we were supposed to attend his company's summer gala, one of those events where spouses were expected to look beautiful and say little. I'd promised to go weeks ago, but that same evening I had a client presentation scheduled, a potential contract worth $25,000. I couldn't miss it. "Daniel," I said that morning over breakfast, "I can't make it to the gala tonight." He looked up from his phone, confused. "What do you mean you can't make it?" "I have a commitment. Something important. More important than my career? Than supporting me at a crucial company event." I took a breath. "Yes. More important than that." His face went dark. "Let me guess. Another one of your little design projects." "It's not little. It's a major client. A financial services company that needs a complete rebrand. This could change everything for me." "Change everything? You mean change your hobby into something you take even more seriously, while neglecting your actual responsibilities?" "My responsibilities? Daniel, I've been to every single one of your company events for 15 years. Every dinner, every gala, every weekend golf tournament. I've smiled and made small talk and represented you perfectly. One night. I'm asking for one night to pursue something that matters to me. If you don't come tonight, it sends a message," he said coldly. "It tells my colleagues and my boss that my wife doesn't support me, that my home life isn't stable. Do you understand what that could do to my career? Do you understand what 15 years of not supporting me has done to mine?" We stared at each other across the breakfast table, and I saw the exact moment when he realized he couldn't control me anymore. Something shifted in his eyes, something that looked almost like fear. "If you don't come tonight," he said slowly, "there will be consequences." "I'm not coming." He left without another word. I went to my presentation, nailed it, and secured the $25,000 contract. That night, while Daniel was at his gala, I celebrated alone in my spare bedroom studio, looking at the signed contract, feeling simultaneously triumphant and terrified. When he came home after midnight, he went straight to the guest room. He didn't speak to me for 3 days. In September, something happened that changed everything. A marketing executive named Jordan Chan reached out to me through LinkedIn. His firm represented a major athletic apparel company that was launching a new line specifically for women over 40. They needed a creative director for the campaign, someone who understood the demographic authentically. They'd seen my work, particularly my Second Brew project and Patricia's Bakery rebrand, and thought I had exactly the perspective they needed. The contract was for 6 months. The pay was $90,000. I read the email 3 times, my hands shaking. This wasn't small business work anymore. This was legitimate, high-level corporate design work. The kind of opportunity Daniel said I'd never be good enough to get. I took the meeting without telling him. I wore the one business suit I still owned, prayed it wasn't too outdated, and drove downtown to an office building with glass walls and expensive art in the lobby. Jordan was younger than me, maybe 35, with an easy smile and a firm handshake. We talked for 2 hours about the campaign, about reaching women who felt invisible in an industry obsessed with youth. "You get it," he said finally. "Most of the designers we've talked to, even the women, they don't get it. They're too young or too focused on trends. But you understand what it feels like to be dismissed, to be told you're past your prime. That authenticity is what we need." He offered me the position before I left the building. I drove home in a daze, pulled into our driveway, and sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to process what had just happened. $90,000. 6 months. A real career, not a hobby, not a cute little side project, but an actual professional position with a major corporation. That night, I told Daniel everything. I waited until after dinner, until we were sitting in the living room with our coffee, the television muted. I told him about the clients, the money, the networking, the growth of my business. I told him about Jordan Chan and the athletic apparel campaign. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he set down his coffee cup very carefully. "So you've been lying to me," he said. "For almost a year." "I've been protecting something that mattered to me," I corrected. "And this job offer, you're actually considering taking it." "I've already accepted it." His face went red. "Without discussing it with me? Without considering how it affects our life, our marriage? The way you didn't discuss telling me I'd never be independent?" My voice was calmer than I felt. "The way you didn't consider how your words affected me? Don't turn this around. You deceived me, Marianne. You've been living some secret life, pretending to be someone you're not." "No," I said. "I've been remembering who I actually am." He stood up, pacing now. "This is insane. You're throwing away 15 years of marriage for what? Some vanity project? Some feminist midlife rebellion?" "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm asking you to see me." "I do see you." "No, you don't. You see a version of me that you created, a supporting character in your life. But I'm more than that. I've always been more than that." We argued for hours. He said I was being selfish, irresponsible, that I was destroying our family. I pointed out we didn't have a family, that we had a household where he worked and I served. He said that wasn't fair, that he'd provided everything I needed. I said I didn't need a provider, I needed a partner. Around midnight, exhausted and raw, I said something I'd been thinking for months. "Daniel, when was the last time you asked me about my dreams? When was the last time you were curious about what I wanted, what I thought about, what mattered to me?" He stared at me. I could see him trying to remember, trying to come up with an answer. He couldn't. "That's what I thought," I said softly. I slept in the spare bedroom that night. In the morning, I started looking for apartments. The next few weeks were brutal. Daniel oscillated between anger and bargaining, sometimes trying to convince me to turn down the job, sometimes ignoring me completely. His mother called, horrified that I was abandoning her son. His father sent a cold email about the importance of marriage vows. Friends we'd had for years began choosing sides, and most chose him. But something in me had hardened. I'd spent 15 years making myself smaller, quieter, less. I wasn't going to do it anymore. I found a small one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood I'd always loved, Wicker Park, full of artists and creative energy. It wasn't fancy, nothing like our suburban house with its perfect lawn and 3-car garage. But it had huge windows that let in morning light, and the spare room was perfect for a design studio. I moved out on a Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after Daniel had told me I'd never make it on my own. I hired movers for my desk, my laptop, my clothes. Everything else I left behind. The designer dishes, the expensive furniture, the diamond earrings. They'd never been mine anyway. Daniel wasn't home when I left. I wrote him a letter, left it on the kitchen counter. In it, I didn't blame him for everything. I took responsibility for my part, for staying silent so long, for accepting his version of who I should be. But I also told him the truth, that I couldn't be married to someone who didn't respect me, who didn't believe in me, who saw my growth as a threat to his control. I locked the door behind me and drove away from 15 years of my life. The apartment felt vast and empty that first night. I ordered pizza, sat on the floor because my furniture hadn't arrived yet, and cried. Not because I regretted leaving, but because I was grieving. Grieving the marriage I thought I'd had, the partnership I'd imagined, the version of Daniel who'd never actually existed. But the next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through those big windows, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. The athletic apparel campaign consumed my life for the next 6 months. I worked with photographers, copywriters, marketing strategists, all of us building this campaign from the ground up. The concept was simple but powerful. Still rising. We featured real women over 40 who were athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, activists. Women who refused to be invisible. One of the women we featured was a 62-year-old marathon runner who'd started competing at 55. Another was a 50-year-old who'd launched a tech company after being laid off from her corporate job. There was a 48-year-old professional surfer, a 53-year-old medical researcher who just won a major award. And then there was me. Jordan suggested we include my story, the creative director who'd rebuilt her career at 44. I hesitated, uncomfortable with being in the spotlight. But he convinced me. Your story matters, he said. You're exactly who this campaign is for. So I let them photograph me in my studio apartment, surrounded by sketches and design samples, natural light pouring through those windows I loved. I told a condensed version of my story. The lost years, the rediscovery, the leap into independence. They made me look powerful, creative, alive. When the campaign launched in March, it was everywhere. Billboards, bus stops, magazine spreads, social media. The response was overwhelming. Women shared their own stories of starting over, of reclaiming themselves, of refusing to accept limitations. The athletic apparel line sold out within weeks. And my face, 45-year-old Marian Fletcher, was on a billboard in downtown Chicago, right across from Daniel's office building. I didn't plan that. Jordan's team chose the locations based on traffic patterns and demographics. But when I drove past it for the first time and saw my own face 20 feet tall with the words still rising underneath, I had to pull over because I was laughing and crying at the same time. My phone rang a week after the billboards went up. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Marianne," he said. His voice sounded different, smaller somehow. "I saw the billboard. I figured you might. You look incredible. Happy." "I am happy." There was a long pause. "I made a mistake," he said finally. "I should have supported you. I should have believed in you." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have. Is there any chance we could try again? Start over?" I looked around my apartment, at the designs covering my walls, at the schedule on my whiteboard showing my week of client meetings and creative sessions. I thought about the woman I'd become in the past 18 months, the strength I'd discovered, the life I'd built. "No," I said gently. "I don't think so. Please, Marianne. I was wrong. I see that now. The problem isn't just that you were wrong, Daniel. The problem is that you only see it now that I'm successful, now that I'm visible in a way you can't ignore. You didn't see me when I was struggling, when I was building this from nothing. You only see me now that I'm on a billboard." He started to argue, but I cut him off. "I hope you find happiness," I said. "I really do. But I'm not going to be small anymore just to make someone else comfortable. Not even for you." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I didn't fight for the house or the cars or any of the things we'd accumulated. I had my own money now, enough to live on, enough to keep building. My design business was thriving, a steady stream of clients who'd found me through the campaign. I'd raised my rates again, hired an assistant, was considering bringing on another designer. But more than the success, more than the money or the recognition, what mattered was how I felt when I woke up each morning. Like myself. Whole. Purposeful. Patricia, the bakery owner who'd been my first real client, called me one afternoon in tears. Her business had tripled since the rebrand. She was opening a second location. Would I design everything for the new space? Of course I would. I started teaching design workshops for women over 40 who wanted to restart their careers or discover new skills. Every month, 20 women gathered in my studio apartment, and we talked about design, yes, but also about fear and courage and the stories we tell ourselves about what we can and cannot do. One woman, a 52-year-old named Gloria, told me, "I spent 30 years as a dental hygienist and I was good at it, but I never loved it. I always wanted to be a graphic designer. My husband said I was too old to change careers. But seeing that billboard, I realized he was wrong." Stories like that kept me going, reminded me why this work mattered. A year after the divorce, I met someone. His name was Benjamin Cole, and he was an architect I'd met through a mutual client. He was 48, divorced, with one daughter in college and an easygoing warmth about him. What I loved most about Benjamin was the way he asked questions. Real questions about my work and my thoughts and my dreams. He listened when I answered. Actually listened. "Tell me about this design," he'd say, looking at my sketches. "What were you trying to capture?" And I'd tell him, and he'd nod. And sometimes he'd offer a perspective I hadn't considered. We collaborated on projects sometimes, his architectural vision complementing my design aesthetic. We challenged each other creatively, supported each other's growth. Our relationship developed slowly, carefully. Neither of us was in a rush. We'd both been burned before. Both learned the hard way what it meant to be in a relationship with someone who didn't see us. Benjamin understood that I needed my independence, my space, my work. He never asked me to be less so he could feel more. One evening, maybe 6 months into our relationship, we were having dinner at my place, and he noticed the framed photo I kept on my desk. It was from the billboard campaign, me in my studio surrounded by my work. "That's the moment you knew you'd made it?" he asked. I thought about that. "No," I said finally. "I knew I'd made it the day I left Daniel's house. The billboard was just proof for everyone else." He smiled. "That's the difference between you and most people. You don't need external validation." "I did once," I admitted. "But not anymore." Benjamin's daughter, Sophie, came to visit that summer. She was 21, bright-eyed and studying environmental science. Over brunch one Sunday, she asked me about my career change. "My mom stayed in a bad marriage for way too long," she said, spreading jam on her toast. "She was miserable, but she thought she couldn't leave because of me. When she finally did, when I was in high school, she told me she wished she'd done it sooner. She said she'd wasted years being someone she wasn't." "You didn't waste as many years as she did, but still. Why do women do that? Why do we make ourselves small?" I looked at this young woman, so much like I'd been at her age, and I wanted to give her something valuable. "Because we're taught to," I said. "We're taught that being accommodating is the same as being kind. That being supportive means being silent. That love means sacrifice even when the sacrifice is ourselves. It takes a long time to unlearn those lessons. But you did unlearn them. Eventually. After a lot of pain. I don't want that for your generation. I want you and women like you to know from the beginning that you don't have to choose between being loved and being yourself." Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "That's what my dad seems to get. He never asks you to be anything other than what you are." "No," I agreed, glancing at Benjamin. "He doesn't." 2 years after I'd moved out of Daniel's house, Jordan called with another opportunity. The athletic apparel company had been so pleased with the Still Rising campaign that they wanted to create a foundation, supporting women over 40 who were starting businesses or pursuing new careers. They wanted me to be the creative director, building the brand from the ground up. It was a dream project. Purpose and profit, art and impact, everything I'd ever wanted from my work. I said yes without hesitation. The foundation launched with a gala in downtown Chicago. Hundreds of people attended. Business leaders, philanthropists, the women we'd featured in the original campaign, including the marathon runner and the tech entrepreneur. I wore a dress I designed myself, bold colors and clean lines. Nothing like the beige neutrality of my old life. Patricia was there, representing small business success stories. Gloria was there too, with samples of the design work she'd created in my workshops. Benjamin came as my date, talking enthusiastically with other architects and designers, capturing the energy of the evening. And then toward the end of the night I saw him, Daniel, standing near the bar, watching me from across the room. I excused myself from the conversation I was having and walked over to him. He looked older, tired around the eyes. There were lines on his face I didn't remember, gray in his hair that hadn't been there before. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not unkindly. "I got an invitation. Friend of a friend who's involved with the foundation. I didn't know you'd be here." He paused. "That's a lie. I knew. I wanted to see you." "Why?" "Because I need to tell you something." He took a breath. "You were right. About everything. I tried to make you small because I was afraid of how big you could be. I told you that you'd never make it on your own because I was terrified you'd realize you didn't need me. And I was right to be terrified because look at you. You're incredible, Marianne. You always were. I just couldn't see it." Tears were running down his face. A year ago, 2 years ago, seeing him cry would have broken me. But now I just felt sad for him for all the time we'd wasted. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It means something, hearing you acknowledge it. Is there any chance?" "No." I said it firmly but not cruelly. "Daniel, I've built a life I love. I'm with someone who sees me, who celebrates me, who never makes me feel like I need to be less. I hope you find that too. I really do. But it's not going to be with me." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I know I have no right to be, but I am." "You can be proud," I told him. "From a distance." I walked back to Benjamin, who was waiting near the window. He pulled me close, kissed my forehead. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, looking around at the room full of people celebrating women's potential, at the foundation I'd helped create, at the life I'd built from the ashes of who I used to be. "I'm more than okay." The gala ended late. Benjamin and I walked to my car through the Chicago night, past the billboard that still featured my face, still proclaimed "Still Rising." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't started designing again?" Benjamin asked. I considered that. Sometimes. But honestly, I think I would have found my way back to myself eventually. Maybe it wouldn't have been design. Maybe it would have been something else. But I couldn't stay invisible forever. I wasn't built for it. "No," he agreed. "You definitely weren't." We drove back to my apartment, now twice the size of the first one, with a dedicated studio space and those same big windows I'd fallen in love with. I made tea while Benjamin looked through some architectural drawings he'd brought to show me. We sat on the couch talking about our work, about a potential collaboration on a community art center, about the future we were building together. "This one," Benjamin said, stopping on a sketch. "What do you think about incorporating some of your design elements here? Your color theory could really enhance the spatial flow." I looked at the drawing, seeing immediately what he meant. Yes. And if we adjust the entrance sequence, we could create a more dramatic reveal of the main space. We worked together for another hour, trading ideas, building on each other's concepts. This was partnership. This was what I'd been missing for so long. That night, as I lay in bed with Benjamin sleeping beside me, I thought about everything I'd learned. About the cost of making yourself small. About the courage it takes to claim your space. About the difference between being supported and being controlled. I thought about all the women in my workshops who'd been told they were too old, too inexperienced, too late. I thought about Patricia crying over her new logo, Gloria showing me her first completed design project, the marathon runner who'd started running at an age when people told her to slow down. We're taught to make ourselves palatable, to not take up too much room, to defer our dreams for the comfort of others. And some of us do that for years, decades, entire lifetimes. We become so good at being small that we forget we were ever meant to be big. But here's what I learned. It's never too late. It's never too late to start over, to learn something new, to become who you were always meant to be. People will tell you that you can't, that you shouldn't, that you're foolish to try. They'll say these things because your growth threatens their comfort, because your independence challenges their control, because your success forces them to confront their own limitations. Let them say it. Then prove them wrong. 3 years after I left Daniel's house, my design firm had 15 employees. We specialized in rebranding for women-owned businesses and nonprofits focused on women's empowerment. Every client we worked with got more than just design. They got a piece of our story, proof that reinvention was possible. The foundation grew too. We gave grants to hundreds of women, provided mentorship, created a network of support. I met women in their 50s starting tech companies, women in their 60s going back to school, women in their 70s launching their first books. Age became irrelevant. Only courage mattered. I still taught workshops once a month. They'd grown so much that we had to move to a larger space. A converted warehouse with natural light and room for 50 students. Benjamin often came to observe the sessions, interested in how I'd transformed the space, how I'd created an environment that fostered creativity and confidence. One Saturday, a woman approached me after class. She was probably in her mid-40s, well-dressed, nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her notebook. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Of course. My husband says I'm wasting my time here. He says I'm too old to learn design, that I should focus on supporting his career instead of having fantasies about my own. But seeing you, hearing your story, I realized something. If I don't try, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. And I can't live like that anymore." I felt tears prick my eyes. "What's your name?" "Jennifer." "Jennifer, let me tell you something. Your husband is wrong. You're not too old. You're not wasting your time. And this isn't a fantasy. This is you remembering who you are. Don't let anyone convince you to forget again." She hugged me, crying, thanking me. I watched her leave the studio with her head held higher than when she'd arrived, and I felt that familiar surge of purpose. This was why I'd gone through everything. Not for the billboards or the success or even the career itself. For this moment, when one woman's courage could inspire another's. The phone calls from Daniel eventually stopped. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd remarried, had a baby on the way. Part of me hoped he'd learned something, that he'd be different with his new wife and child. But I also knew that wasn't my concern anymore. His growth or lack thereof was no longer my responsibility. My mother visited me on a Sunday in May. She walked around my studio, touching the design samples, looking at the framed magazine spreads featuring my work, reading the thank you notes from clients that I'd pinned to a bulletin board. "I'm proud of you," she said finally. "But I'm also sorry." "Sorry for what?" "For not being more insistent that day at your wedding. I knew. I could see how he'd try to make you smaller. But you were so happy, or at least you seemed happy, and I thought maybe I was wrong. I should have trusted my instincts." I took her hand. "Mom, if you'd insisted, I probably wouldn't have listened. I needed to learn this lesson myself. I needed to lose myself so I could find myself again." "That's very philosophical," she said with a small smile. "But I still wish I'd saved you some pain." "The pain taught me," I said. "It taught me what I wouldn't tolerate anymore, what I deserved, who I actually was. I don't regret it. Any of it." She hugged me tightly. "My daughter, the designer. The entrepreneur. The woman on the billboard. Your daughter, the woman who finally figured out who she was." My mother pulled back, looking at me seriously. "You know what I love most about all this? It's not the money or the recognition or even the career. It's that you're happy. Really genuinely happy. When you were with Daniel, even in the early years, there was always this shadow in your eyes. Like you were holding your breath, waiting for permission to exhale. That shadow is gone now." She was right. I hadn't even realized it until she said it, but that constant tension, that perpetual sense of walking on eggshells, of monitoring my words and actions to avoid conflict, it had vanished. I breathed freely now. 5 years after I'd walked away from my marriage, the foundation decided to create a documentary about women who'd reinvented themselves after 40. They wanted to feature 5 women, and I was one of them. The filmmaker, a talented woman named Sasha Rodriguez, spent weeks interviewing me, filming me at work, talking to my clients and students and colleagues. She interviewed Patricia, who now owned 4 bakeries across the city. She talked to Gloria, who'd left her dental hygiene career, and now ran a successful design business of her own. She even tracked down Daniel, though I didn't know about that until I saw the finished film. In the documentary, Daniel appeared for maybe 90 seconds. He sat in what looked like a corporate office, wearing a suit, looking uncomfortable. The confident man I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who looked smaller, diminished. "I told my ex-wife she'd never make it on her own," he said to the camera. "I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was especially wrong about that. Marianne is one of the most talented, determined people I've ever known. I just couldn't see it when I was too busy trying to control her." It was the closest he'd ever come to a real apology. Watching it, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and pity. He'd held all the power in our marriage, and he'd used it to diminish me. Now he had to watch from the outside as I soared. The documentary premiered at a film festival in New York. I flew out with Benjamin, Patricia, and Gloria. We sat in a darkened theater with 200 strangers and watched our stories unfold on screen. When my segment began, I almost didn't recognize myself. Not the current me who was confident and successful, but the woman I'd been in those early months after leaving Daniel, still uncertain, still rebuilding. Sasha had captured something raw and honest about that time. "I didn't leave because I knew I'd succeed," documentary me said to the camera. "I left because I knew I'd die inside if I stayed. And I'd rather fail at being myself than succeed at being someone else's version of me." The theater was silent. Then, as the segment ended and moved to the next woman's story, someone started clapping. Then someone else. Soon the entire audience was applauding, and I realized they were applauding for all of us, for every woman who'd ever had to choose between comfort and authenticity. Gloria grabbed my hand in the darkness. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." The documentary ended with all 5 women together, talking about what we'd learned. The final question Sasha asked was, "What would you say to women who are where you were, who feel stuck and invisible and afraid?" I thought carefully about my answer. I'd say this: The person telling you that you can't do something usually has something to lose if you succeed. Your growth threatens their control. Your independence challenges their authority. Your success forces them to confront their own limitations. So when someone tells you that you're too old, too inexperienced, too late, ask yourself why they need you to believe that. Ask yourself who benefits from your smallness. Then do it anyway. Try anyway. Become yourself anyway. Because the only person's permission you need is your own. The documentary went viral when it was released online. Millions of views, thousands of comments from women sharing their own stories of reinvention. My design firm got so many inquiries that I had to hire 2 more assistants just to manage them. The Foundation's grants program expanded to serve women internationally. But the moment that meant the most came 6 months after the documentary's release. I was teaching a workshop when a young woman, maybe 23, raised her hand. "I'm not over 40, she said. "I probably shouldn't even be here. But I watched your documentary, and I realized I don't want to wait until I'm 40 to become who I'm supposed to be. I want to start now. Is that okay?" The room went quiet. I looked at this young woman so much like I'd been at her age, and I felt something shift. "Yes," I said. "Start now. Don't wait. Don't let anyone convince you to be smaller than you are. And definitely don't waste years of your life thinking you need permission to be yourself." She nodded, eyes bright. "Thank you." After class, she approached me with a portfolio. "I'm a designer too," she said shyly. "Or I want to be. I'm studying at the Art Institute, but my parents want me to get a real job. Something stable. They say design is too risky." I looked through her portfolio. She was talented, raw but promising. She reminded me of myself in my 20s, full of potential but unsure if she was allowed to pursue it. "Can I give you some advice?" I asked. "Please. Your parents love you. They want you to be safe. But safe and small aren't the same thing. You can build a career in design. It won't be easy and it won't be predictable, but it's possible. I'm proof of that. So is everyone in this room. Don't let fear, yours or anyone else's, stop you from becoming who you're meant to be." She was crying now. I needed to hear that. I know. I needed to hear it too once. The difference is I waited 20 years for someone to say it. You don't have to wait. Start now. I hired her as an intern the following week. Her name was Ashley Martinez, and she had that same hunger I'd had, that same desperate need to prove she could do this. I mentored her the way I wish someone had mentored me, with encouragement and challenge, with belief and honesty. 6 months later, she designed a complete brand identity for a nonprofit that had come to us for help. It was exceptional work, mature beyond her years. When I showed it to the client, they were thrilled. "You taught her well," the client said. "No," I corrected. "I just didn't stand in her way." Benjamin and I got married on a Saturday in October, 7 years after I'd walked away from my first marriage. It was a small ceremony, just 50 people, held in my studio with designs covering the walls and afternoon light streaming through the windows. Patricia made the cake, a towering creation that somehow managed to be both elegant and whimsical. Gloria designed the invitations, beautiful letterpress pieces that several guests asked if they could keep as art. Ashley photographed the whole thing, her first wedding as a professional photographer. I wore a dress I designed myself, a deep emerald green with clean lines and unexpected details. Nothing like the traditional white gown Daniel's mother had chosen for me decades ago. When Benjamin saw me walking toward him, he cried. Actually cried. Not from sadness or obligation, but from joy, from seeing me exactly as I was and loving what he saw. When we exchanged vows, I promised to be his partner, not his supporter. To stand beside him, not behind him. To grow with him, not shrink for him. "I promise to always see you," he said, his voice steady and certain. "Not who I think you should be, but who you actually are. And to celebrate every version of yourself you become." That was the vow that made me cry. My mother was there, beaming with a happiness that seemed to radiate from her entire being. Daniel was not. I'd heard he'd remarried, had a baby girl now, a tiny thing with his dark hair. I hoped he was happy. I hoped he'd learn to see his new wife really see her. I hoped his daughter would grow up knowing she could be anything she wanted to be. The reception was casual, everyone mingling and laughing and sharing stories. Patricia cornered me at one point, tears streaming down her face despite her smile. Do you remember that first day? She asked. When you came to my bakery so nervous with your laptop and your ideas? Of course. You told me you hadn't worked in 12 years. You were terrified I wouldn't take you seriously. But I saw something in you, Marianne. I saw hunger, determination, someone who needed to prove something not to me but to herself. You took a chance on me. No, she said firmly. You took a chance on yourself. I just didn't get in your way. That phrase again. The highest compliment anyone had ever given me. The greatest gift one person could give another. Not blocking their path, not limiting their potential, not making them smaller so you could feel bigger. As the evening wore on and the party shifted from dinner to dancing, I found myself standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. Chicago at night, full of possibility and promise. Benjamin came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. Everything. How different my life is now. How different I am. Do you ever miss it? The old life. I thought about that honestly. Did I miss the big house, the financial security that came from someone else's paycheck, the comfort of routine and predictability? Maybe a little, in the way you might miss a familiar pair of shoes even after you've outgrown them. But did I miss the woman I'd been, small and silent and shrinking? No, I said. Not even a little bit. The foundation celebrated its 5th anniversary with a gala even bigger than the first. By then, we'd given grants to over 5,000 women, helped launch hundreds of businesses, funded career transitions and educational pursuits, created a network that spanned 3 continents. The athletic apparel company that had started it all was thrilled with the impact, with the stories of transformation that kept pouring in. I gave a speech that night, standing at a podium in front of hundreds of people, talking about the journey from invisible wife to independent entrepreneur, from whispered doubt to shouted confidence. I talked about the women who'd inspired me, the ones who'd taken my workshops and gone on to do extraordinary things. I talked about Patricia's bakery empire, Gloria's design business, Ashley's photography career. I talked about the 62-year-old marathon runner, and the 50-year-old tech entrepreneur, and the 73-year-old who'd published her first novel. 5 years ago, I said, my voice carrying across the room, someone told me I'd never be independent, that I'd never make it on my own, that I was too old, too inexperienced, too late. Tonight, I stand before you as the creative director of a foundation that has changed thousands of lives, as the owner of a design firm that employs 23 people, as a woman whose name is on buildings and billboards and business cards. But more importantly, I stand here as myself. Finally, completely, unapologetically myself. The applause was deafening. Women stood, some crying, all of them understanding exactly what I meant. They'd felt it too, that sense of disappearing, of becoming less, of forgetting who they'd once been. And they'd found their way back, just like I had. After the gala, Patricia, Gloria, Ashley, and I went out for late-night coffee. We sat in a diner booth, exhausted and exhilarated, rehashing the evening's best moments. These women had become more than clients or students. They were my sisters, my tribe, proof that transformation was contagious. Remember when you told me I was wasting my time? Gloria said to me with a grin. In that first workshop, when I said I wanted to be a designer, you didn't say that, but my husband did. And I almost believed him. What changed? Ashley asked, leaning forward with that curiosity that made her such a good photographer. Marian changed. She showed me it was possible. And then I just had to decide if I was brave enough to try. Were you scared? Ashley asked. Terrified, Gloria admitted without hesitation. Leaving a stable career at 52? Starting over in a field I knew nothing about? It was insane. But staying would have been worse. Staying would have meant accepting that I'd never be more than what I already was. And I couldn't live with that. That's the choice, isn't it? Patricia said thoughtfully, stirring sugar into her coffee. Comfortable misery or terrifying possibility? I raised my coffee cup. To terrifying possibility. They all raised theirs, the porcelain clinking together in a toast. To terrifying possibility. We clinked our mugs together. For women at different stages of the same journey. All of us having chosen growth over comfort. Authenticity over acceptance. Possibility over certainty. 9 years after I'd left Daniel's house, I got an unexpected call. It was from a publisher who'd read about me, seen the documentary, followed my work with the foundation. They wanted me to write a book about my journey, about reinvention and resilience and finding yourself at midlife. I'm not a writer, I protested. You're a storyteller, the publisher countered. Design is visual storytelling. This would just be verbal storytelling. And your story needs to be told. More than that, it needs to be heard by the millions of women who are where you were. I thought about it for a week, discussing it with Benjamin, with my mother, with the women in my workshops. Finally, I called the publisher back. I'll do it, I said. But only if I can include other women's stories too. Mine isn't unique. It's universal. And other women need to know they're not alone. The publisher agreed immediately, excited by the prospect of a book that wove multiple narratives together. I spent the next year interviewing women who'd reinvented themselves after 40, after 50, after 60, even after 70. Women who'd left marriages or started businesses or gone back to school or changed careers or discovered passions they didn't know they had. Women who'd been told they were too late and proved everyone wrong. The book was published on the 10th anniversary of the day I'd left Daniel. The title was Still Rising: How I Found Myself After 40. It became a bestseller within weeks. Book tours took me across the country. In every city, women lined up, sometimes for hours, to tell me their stories, to thank me for giving them courage, to show me the businesses they'd started or the art they'd created or the lives they'd built. In Seattle, a 60-year-old woman showed me her acceptance letter to law school. I start in the fall, she said, her face glowing with excitement and terror. My children think I'm crazy, but I don't care. I've wanted this my whole life. In Boston, a 48-year-old brought me a jar of the artisanal jam she'd started making and selling. I'm making more money than I did in my corporate job, she told me, her eyes bright. And I'm actually happy. I wake up excited instead of dreading the day. In Austin, a 55-year-old shared photos of the tiny house she built with her own hands after her divorce. I didn't know I could do this, she said, flipping through images on her phone. I'd never used a power tool in my life. Then I read your book and thought, why not try? These moments, these women, these stories, they were why I'd written the book. Not for fame or money or validation, but to light a path for women still walking in darkness, still believing the lies they'd been told about their limitations. The book tour ended back in Chicago with a reading at a bookstore downtown. The room was packed, standing room only, women of all ages waiting to hear me speak. I read passages about leaving Daniel, about starting my design business, about the terror and exhilaration of becoming myself. During the Q&A, a woman raised her hand. Do you ever talk to your ex-husband? Does he know about your success? I paused, considering how to answer. I saw him once at a gala years ago. He apologized, acknowledged he'd been wrong. I appreciated that. But we don't have a relationship anymore. That chapter of my life is closed. Do you hate him? No, I said honestly. I don't hate him. Pity him sometimes. He had a partner who wanted to grow, and he chose to suppress her rather than support her. He could have been part of this journey, could have grown alongside me. Instead, he's watching it from the outside. That's his loss, not mine. Another woman stood, her voice shaking slightly. What would you say to women who want to leave but are afraid? Afraid of failing, afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over. I looked at her, at all of them, these women who'd come seeking permission or courage or hope. I'd say this. I began slowly, choosing my words carefully. Fear is real. It's valid. Starting over is terrifying. But staying in a situation where you're diminished, where you're made small, where you're told you're less than you are, that's terrifying too. It's just a familiar terror, so we tolerate it. We convince ourselves it's not that bad. We tell ourselves everyone compromises in relationships. But here's what I learned. There's a difference between compromise and erasure. Compromise means both people adjust. Erasure means only one person disappears. And you're stronger than you think. Braver than you know. More capable than anyone has told you. The question isn't whether you can do it. The question is whether you're willing to find out. The room was silent for a moment, that heavy silence that comes when truth has been spoken. Then everyone started clapping. After the reading, I signed books for 2 hours. Every woman who came through the line had a story, a dream, a plan, a fear. I listened to all of them, offered encouragement, reminded them that they weren't too late, weren't too old, weren't too anything except exactly what they needed to be. The last woman in line was young, maybe 30. "I'm not 40 yet," she said apologetically, clutching her book to her chest. "But I wanted to tell you something. My mother spent her whole life making herself small for my father. She had dreams once, but she gave them up. She died 2 years ago, and at her funeral, someone mentioned she'd wanted to be a painter. I didn't even know that about her. She never told us. She buried that dream so deep that even her own children didn't know it existed." Tears were streaming down the young woman's face. "I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to wait until it's too late. I'm not going to let anyone make me forget who I am. Because of you, because of your book, I'm going to be different. And my mother's dreams don't have to die with her. I'm taking painting classes. I'm doing it for both of us." I came around the table and hugged her, both of us crying now, both of us understanding the weight of unlived dreams, the tragedy of potential never realized. "Your mother would be so proud," I whispered. "I hope she's watching." After she left, I sat alone in the empty bookstore, surrounded by stacks of books with my name on the cover. 10 years ago, I'd been sitting in a suburban kitchen, being told I'd never be independent. Now I was here, having touched thousands of lives, having created something that mattered. Benjamin picked me up, and we drove home through the city. We passed one of the old, still rising billboards, the campaign that had started everything. My face had been replaced years ago with new models, new stories, but the message was the same. Still rising. Always rising. "Do you think you've changed enough lives?" Benjamin asked as we pulled into our driveway. I thought about that. About Patricia's 4 bakeries and the employees she'd hired. About Gloria's design business and the clients she'd served. About Ashley's thriving photography career and the moments she'd captured. About the 60-year-old law student and the 48-year-old jam maker and the 55-year-old who'd built her own house. About the thousands of women who'd received grants from the foundation, who'd taken my workshops, who'd read my book. About my mother, who'd lived to see me become myself. About the young woman who was taking painting classes for her mother and herself. "No," I said finally. "Not yet. There are still women out there being told they're too late, too old, too much, or not enough. Still women making themselves small, waiting for permission, believing the limitations others put on them. Until all of them know they can rise, I'm not done." Benjamin smiled, reached over and squeezed my hand. I wouldn't expect anything less. We walked inside our house, a beautiful place we bought together 3 years ago, full of light and art and life and laughter. My studio was upstairs, always evolving, always creating. Benjamin's architecture office occupied another room, his drafting table covered with plans and sketches. We'd built this life together. 2 whole people choosing to be together, not needing each other but wanting each other. Partnership, not ownership. Collaboration, not control. That night I checked my email before bed. There was a message from a woman in Nebraska. She'd read my book, she said, and it had given her courage to leave her marriage after 25 years. She was 50 years old and starting a catering business. She was terrified but determined. She just wanted me to know that my story had changed her story. I read the email 3 times, then wrote back, "You're not starting at 50. You're rising at 50. There's a difference. And I believe in you. More importantly, believe in yourself. You've already done the hardest part, you've begun." I sent the email and closed my laptop. Benjamin was already in bed, reading a book about sustainable architecture, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking up. "Everything's perfect," I said, climbing in next to him. And it was. Not perfect in the sense of flawless or easy or without challenge. Perfect in the sense of authentic, of real, of mine. I'd built a life that fit me, a career that fulfilled me, relationships that honored me. I'd proven Daniel wrong, yes. But more importantly, I'd proven myself right. I was more than a supporting character. I was more than a wife who kept house and asked no questions and dreamed no dreams. I was Marian Fletcher, designer, entrepreneur, author, advocate, mentor, woman who'd found herself when everyone said she was lost. Did I do the right thing leaving when I did? Tell me what you think in the comments. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you're too late or too old or not enough, know this. It's never too late to become who you were always meant to be. It's never too late to rise. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it. And now my name isn't just on billboards. It's on a life I'm proud of, a legacy I'm building, a future I'm creating. It's on a foundation that changes lives and a book that inspires courage and a design firm that empowers women. That's worth more than any marriage that required me to be small. That's worth everything. If you like this story, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to get more stories from me. With love and respect, Auntie Helen Stories.